Politic. Авторская программа Кирилла Задова, посвященная текущим мировым проблемам. Politic. Предвзятый обзор, субъективные комментарии и искренние оценки Кирилла Задова. С понедельника по четверг с 4 до 5. Politic. Сказал, как обрезал.
Приветствую, друзья, с вами Кирилл Задов от Politic. Сегодня 16 января 2024, вторник. Сегодня у нас специальный эфир. У нас специальный гость Nicholas Chamberas, Public Affairs Strategist республиканской партии. Мы поговорим о тех проблемах и надеждах, которые сейчас связаны с республиканской партией, нашей партией, в которой ваш покорный слуга состоит и состоял раньше. И поговорим о том, на самом деле, чего можно, что ждать от 2024 года, почему это так важно в 2024 году для республиканцев добиться успеха. Такой план на сегодня. Напоминаю, что вы можете писать 347-460-0877. Это СМС-портал прямого эфира для всех, кто в прямом эфире нас слушает. Нью-Йорк, Майами, Филадельфия, все платформы вещания радио RUSA, ну и, конечно же, Картина ТВ, где мы вещаем 24 часа в сутки, 7 дней в неделю. Также напоминаю, что вы можете подписаться на мой канал в Ютубе, найти его очень просто, наберите Кирилл Задов в YouTube Search или Google Search, и вы увидите канал, подписывайтесь, ну и, соответственно, там ставьте лайк, комментируйте, потому что это поднимает программу в лентах других пользователей по алгоритму всех социальных сетей, также работает и YouTube. Вот примерно, что я хотел сказать в начале, и с нетерпением жду, когда же мы начнем разговор. Николас уже в студии, и очень скоро он к нам подключится.
Politic. Сказал, как обрезал.
I'm glad to introduce Nicholas Chamberas, Political Affairs Strategist. Nicholas, welcome on board. Nice to see you.
Thank you, Kirill. It's great to be here.
The first thing I wanted to ask you, it's now perception after 2020's second elections in November, that midterms elections, that we kind of lost it. We didn't get the wave. We are... Why did we lose?
Yeah, in 2022, going into March of 2022, May, July, all the expectations were that this is going to be a huge blowout for the Republican Party, that we might have a 40, 50 seat, a historic majority. That was the expectation for a lot of pundits. Unfortunately, we saw, barely an 8 or 9 majority come out. And really, I've been outspoken in my writings and on other appearances I've had. I think this is one of the worst administrations in recent history.
That is right. Carter probably was even worse, right?
Just
slightly.
When you look, because Kirill, I'm afraid to go into any one area because it'll take up the show. But when you look at so many facets of this administration, in terms of their handling of crises, scandals, but more so what they were elected to do in terms of the policies they've enacted, the attitudes they've taken, their impact on the economy. They took a thriving, prosperous economy. I'm sorry, I think it's embarrassing that this administration likes to use the COVID numbers as the baseline, right? We had a disaster when COVID hit, when the lockdowns hit. Our economy cratered, the stock market cratered.
Everybody, all over the world, right. Not only by us, everywhere.
So the Biden administration, I guess they think their only saving opportunity is just to say, well, we'll compare it to this, an absolute disaster that lasted for a few months. You can't say you created 2.5 million jobs when...
No, that's COVID created.
Yeah.
Like recovery from COVID created, exactly.
So on the heels of all of that and inflation decimating purchasing power
but
families...
Can we say, I'm sorry for interruption,
Sure.
But can we say that inflation was created also by huge unemployment checks that were signed by Trump also? And stimulus check signed by Trump administration as well?
Well, you could say that, sure. Anytime you have that amount of money, sudden a shock
pumping
to the system.
Right.
Yeah, a shock to the system that will cause that. But again...
and deficit, I'm sorry, of and the chain of supply and destroyed. Everything. It was a huge thing, COVID.
Deficit spending. At the time, you could give policymakers the benefit of the doubt. We'd never dealt with something like this before in the United States.
Absolutely, we never had that, right.
Bernanke, for example, during the housing crisis, the subprime mortgage crisis, he had a frame of reference with the Depression and what they did, what worked and what didn't work.
All of them, even Janet Yellen also when she was fed.
Yeah.
And everyone, they were learning from Greenspan, who was a specialist on depression, and he was watching only two numbers, right? Unemployment and what else? And I forgot the second number they were watching. They were like crazy.
He was watching inflation, I remember.
Inflation rate,
very
right.
carefully.
Not more than 3%.
Yes.
Unemployment not more than 6, I think. 7. Something like that. So they were in those frames, and we didn't see that.
So why I think Trump doesn't bear any responsibility for the inflation is they decided Trump was a pro-energy president.
Oh, yeah,
all forms of energy. Trump wasn't just your typical, drill, baby, drill. He was open to all forms of energy, but he didn't attack one segment of energy.
Exactly. On baseless attack, by the way.
Yes, absolutely.
Baseless attack. Right.
But the Biden administration, first of all, when on your first day of office, you cancel a pipeline that costs at least 40,000 high-paying jobs. First of all, 40,000 high-paying jobs in any economy is a huge, enormous shock to the system. It's a big amount. And what does that do to domestic energy, oil production?
They're not going to invest. They're not going to invest in this.
They're not going to invest. And then it's not just that people who invested in oil production were hit. So automatically, when you raise the price of fuel that much, products become more expensive because
everything.
Transportation becomes more expensive.
And energy delivery, everything.
Exactly.
Look at your Canadian bill. It's like delivery charges twice as the regular charges or usage charges. This is crazy.
Exactly.
Right, that's crazy.
So to basically tie the hands of so many people, to render them bankrupt, insolvent, almost overnight, was insane. And I'm surprised, actually, that more people don't fault the Biden administration for this. Their war on energy, their war on domestic fuel production and natural gas in the United States has cost us dearly. More than spending, in my view, many prominent economists, I'm sure, may have something to say about that different than I do. But the war on fuel, these silly investments in specious companies that are supposed to provide alternative forms of energy,
which everybody know not going to be active till 2035, 2040. Maybe if going to be cheaper way of doing solar batteries and stuff, but technology right now is not at the point of replacing non-renewable sources. So it's stupid. It's stupid at least. So why he did this, you think, because of the party pressure?
Yeah, absolutely. It's all ideological. There's no pragmatism in this administration.
That's a problem.
They're slaves to basically the Green New Deal adherence, these pie-in-the-sky policies that people want to implement. If you look, for example, they had this much heralded fund. I call it a slush fund because, in my view, that's what it is. A $400 billion fund to distribute to alternative energy companies. And some of the biggest recipients of those funds have recently started mass layoffs. I don't remember the names of the companies, so I don't want to mix them up.
That doesn't matter.
I was just reading a couple of weeks ago. It just happened to read. They're cutting hundreds of jobs. So if this is really the way of the future, if this is what we're going to rely on in the future, they wouldn't be cutting jobs now. Again, this is all speculation. It reminds me of the same companies that Obama backed.
Yeah, the first thing, $700 million they gave a loan, I remember. It went bankrupt right away.
Yeah, what was it, Solyndra? Yeah.
Something like that.
Solyndra.
Right.
And again, people are suffering in this country. We have the highest inflation, and it's not disputed, the highest inflation in 40 years. Some economists claim...
before Reagan, right, what we had.
Yeah, some economists claim it's the highest inflation ever.
But that was the case, and the same in 2022 was even worse right now. Right. So I want to ask you, again, so if it was that bad and people felt it bad, so why we didn't win in 2022?
Great question. Because we decided to try to be all things to all people. We lost our nerve, I think. So I want to point something out. The usual, actors in the Rhino industrial complex try to blame President Trump and the Trump messaging. And I reminded everyone that both times President Trump was on the ballot in 2016 and 2020, the GOP had historic wins legislatively. We did very well. Voters came out.
Midterms were bad for us.
But Trump wasn't on the ballot.
Right. It's a midterm,
So that's a big difference.
Right.
And I'll say to you, a lot of voters, and this is something the Republican Party needs to work on, a lot of voters, even if they are registered Republicans, and there could be a number of reasons for this, they will not come out and vote unless President Trump is on the ballot. It's frustrating, especially as a strategist. This is very disappointing. But I looked into this, and I really think it has to do with the messaging. Because when President Trump is on the ballot, he's on television more. His audience is bigger. He has the platform, the forum to talk about issues that Americans care about. In 2022, basically, 2018 was a disaster because of Paul Ryan's policies. 2018, basically, from 2017 through 2019, that regime worked to make sure that they could frustrate, delay, stymie, cancel as many of President Trump's initiatives as they possibly could.
But don't you think that, I'm sorry for interruption, but remember inaugurational speech of Trump in 2017? It was a war campaign. It sounds like a war to Congress. He was outsider, out of establishment, and he came not with peace to them. He came to make a revolution. Nobody likes revolution. It's Washington. So he wanted to drain the swamp, right?
Yes.
So they resisted. They did what they could.
Right. And I
that
think
was not smart. Again, the strategist who was behind, I don't know, Jared Kushner was behind. I don't think Jared Kushner was advising on domestic policies. But whoever wrote that speech, that was a sign for Congress that it's not going to be tango.
I think had President Trump followed through more genuinely on that speech, we would have had better results.
Could be, but it's hard because Congress is important.
Congress is very important, but I think what happened is, and we don't give President Trump nearly enough credit for his emphasis.
Amazing achievements.
Achievements is one thing, but he's a strategist. He's a visionary. He knows how to make deals happen. And I think
it's not working international though. Inside America, yes, also. I agree with you, but also, you see, Trump, I remember him saying that everybody's like a business. But government is not like a business.
Great point.
It's not like a business.
Great point. Absolutely.
Senator is not a businessman. Senator has constituency. They got to create jobs. That's the thing.
Absolutely. But the deep swamp dug in against President Trump.
Democrats started 2016 try to delegitimize Trump of his victory. Obama started even before election that thing of Russian interference in election, and they're starting that again now. You see it? It's all over again. They're preparing for
the one trick pony has retired. I think as someone who recognizes the change we need to make and the wins we need to gain in 2024, I will be a very happy person if Democrats continue this nonsense about authoritarian regime and Russian disinformation. The American people have had it. No one's buying it. Even in New York City, you talk to people who used to, and I'm sorry for your listeners if this is too graphic, but I've had conversations recently with people who used to spit at the mention of the former president's name, and now, they're actually open to supporting him. This is not an exaggeration.
Interestingly, how many votes we're gonna get for November here in New York? It's interesting.
That is interesting. I mean, I don't have the irrational exuberance of some others. The point is that they don't want to hear about Russian interference and disinformation, especially since it has been debunked so thoroughly. And think about it. I don't want to take up too much of your time on this, but think about it from a disinterested perspective, right? You're a liberal, not you. Somebody's a liberal. They didn't support Trump in 2016. They were horrified. They thought he sold out our country to the Russians in 20, and you're looking at this and you're upset and you're despondent, you're outraged, and then the Mueller report comes out, and if you're honest, if you're intellectually honest, you're insulted. Yeah. And there are many, many liberals, many genuine liberals who are offended that any president or anyone should have to go through what the president went through on the flimsiest of pretenses. I mean, my goodness, they ran on democracy is at stake in 2018. This was like a Kafka novel, what they did to him. It was almost surreal. You're listening to Rachel Maddow. You're listening, and I don't even want to mention their names. You're listening to these clowns on the from Capitol Hill make these outrageous claims either on no evidence or promulgating knowingly false information. That's why I think 2024 is going to be so different. I would encourage them to use that nonsense about Russia. People are sick and tired of it.
The more they talk about Trump, the more criminal prosecution is going right now. It all works for us.
People see through it. Even people who will not vote for him
Americans
see
are
through
not
it.
stupid.
No.
They may be slave to, they could be like influenced by the pocket, the wallet, the price of gas, some domestic issues, but they're not stupid. Americans never stupid. They
again,
remember.
When you spend millions of dollars on these investigations, you almost bankrupt hardworking civil servants on no evidence just to wage a political prosecution. No one likes it. Very few people like that in this country. Again, even people who would never vote for Trump, even people who will campaign to the very end against Trump, they're very uncomfortable with this kind of messaging. And that's why I think it's early and Trump has gotten out to huge leads against Biden. And I think this plays a role.
10 points already, right?
10 points. There's swing states where we disappointed in the midterms where Trump is leading. Michigan is a very positive development. For example, with all the turmoil faced by the inner GOP, the state GOP in Michigan, imagine if there was not so much disarray in the state party and the GOP in Michigan, how much farther ahead Trump would be. So I think really it was an embarrassing moment in our history as a country, what happened with the Russia hoax. And it's tempting for unhinged people who really do have TDS. It's tempting for them to go back to it and try to rehabilitate this nonsense, but it's not helping Biden. It's not helping the Democrats. They're really better off at trying to focus on issues, trying to focus on ideology. I welcome them as someone who's a supporter of President Trump. I welcome them to continue this nonsense. They're driving off a cliff.
What do you think Democrats can do else beside that Russian thing? What can do else to delegitimize Trump during campaign? They cannot disqualify him because Supreme Court will definitely put Trump back on ballot in all states that now took him out of primaries ballots.
I'll tell you what they're going to do. If
I'm very interested.
They, to an extent, Democrats are rejoicing over some Republicans' claims that the election is not going to be close, that it's going to be the biggest landslide in American history. They're going to try to lull Republicans and independents into a sense of complacency. They're going to fight this. If they're smart, they're not going to wage a national campaign. It's not in their interests to wage a national campaign on the issues. Because again, whether you're talking about the economy, whether you're talking about education, foreign policy,
we're going to talk about foreign policy
but
later,
the metrics are just not there for them. They have to wage a state-by-state campaign and try to keep the states that can stay in that have been in the Democratic column. You know why the Democrats haven't replaced Biden yet?
I wonder why they at least do not prepare spare.
I'll tell you why. There's 3 reasons why they can't. Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin.
Because of black vote, you think?
No. As long as President Trump is the Republican candidate in 2024, the Democrats do not have any other candidate right
Newsom.
now.
But he can do.
Newsom against Trump. And again, as much as I've gone on interviews on the air and I've basically spoken loudly, stop talking about landslides. Newsom against Trump in Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin is ugly. Trump would have to visit there maybe twice from now through November, and Trump wins.
And show California economical states, right.
The matchup, not nobody, but first of all, unless you're obsessed with 8-year-olds learning about transgender issues in one of those states, you really don't care for Newsom. Newsom does not appeal to working class voters, to traditional blue collar voters. He doesn't, you've heard the term Reagan Democrats.
Right.
He doesn't appeal to Clinton Democrats, more centrists. That's why, for better or worse.
What about Obama Democrats?
Obama Democrats is basically Newsom light. Obama Democrats are, they're still...
2 times Obama won Michigan.
Yes, but he won Michigan against
McCain, who was old and without just continuation of Bush policies, and people were tired of Bush already. And he won against Romney, which was not a bad candidate. Now I understand that Romney was not a bad candidate in 2012.
Romney could have run a much better campaign.
Yeah, that's right.
And someone like Romney, he was all over the place so many times on so many issues. He couldn't connect with blue collar voters. The difference is, and I have to say, I've been obviously very critical.
You got to be good populist. You got to know what you're talking about to people, right? Who are working every day, right?
I've been very critical of President Biden, but one thing I have to say, one of his strengths against President Trump is he can also connect very strongly.
Yeah. In Pennsylvania, he was talking. Right. I heard him.
He has the credibility with them. Whereas someone like Newsom, it's not working. Like I said, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin is a wipeout in favor of President Trump against almost any other Democrat. There must be some who can give him competition in those states, but you're hearing Newsom, Michelle Obama. Not happening.
She cannot, no. But can we say about RFK something? I wanted to ask you about RFK.
Sure.
He's not. He's going to go independent on the ballot, or he's going to go
independent. Yeah.
Oh, then. So nobody. Kamala Harris is nothing, as we see, right? At least for now. Why he didn't resign and make her president and let her use administrative resources by 2024 November, she would be already well known to public. And she's a woman. She's black.
I loved her from not as a Republican strategist and a Trump supporter, but
as a candidate, she could be like a very successful thing to campaign of her.
In 2020, I thought choosing her was brilliant. She was a phenomenal campaigner in 2020. She really covered for Biden in a lot of areas. However, as we've seen,
is VP, right?
The more she's actually come out and some of the things she said, she's made it clear she's not ready for prime time. And
but she's a VP, and she's not supposed to be out. It's after Cheney, by the way, that it started the thing, right. Like every VP can be like a second to president, but it's only in 2 cases a second to president, right? It shouldn't be involved in foreign policy, shouldn't be active at all. You gotta sit securely in secure location, and in case the president is incapable, this is it. Or a senator wants like 50-50, then can break a tie. But it's not supposed to be active person, right?
Right. Cheney played that role well, but nobody's feeling safe. Nobody back then at the time. Right. Nobody, and he had a debate with I remember in 2004. I actually have prospective candidates and candidates watch the debate. He had a debate against John Edwards in the vice presidential debate in 2004, and John Edwards was a prolific torts litigator, personal injury lawyer. Won some of the biggest settlements and verdicts in the history of North Carolina. And everybody was thinking that Cheney would be slaughtered by Edwards.
Cheney was not stupid.
No, and Cheney wiped the floor with him.
Right. He's a politician.
So he played, people wouldn't get nervous thinking that in an emergency somebody like that is in charge. However, after Vice President Harris's some of her appearances, people would be very nervous at the prospect of her being in charge. She does not connect with blue collar voters at all.
So why? So you're saying they don't replace Biden only because they can use 25th Amendment, anything you can use. They don't do it only because they have no substitution for him. Only Biden can connect to voters.
As of now, again,
and black vote also, right? That's important.
And I think they were also trying to see, would President Trump falter in the primaries? Because I'm not taking anything away from the other candidates.
That's not smart. They know that he's already in lead on all polls that taken on Republicans. And independent Republicans, not Trump-based, he's already in the lead. We saw Iowa today. Iowa is crazy. It's Caucasus. We'll see New Hampshire. And after New Hampshire, nobody can have any illusions who's going to be the running.
Yeah, because they didn't have their pulse, their hands on the pulse of the Republican electorate.
Everybody. Wall Street Journal published.
They're Democrat strategists who yesterday thought that Nikki Haley would come close in Iowa.
Who? To Trump?
Yeah, it's
New
insane.
Hampshire she might, they say.
Look, New Hampshire, you have a bunch of Democrats and Democratic organizations out in the field desperately trying to push her because she's the weakest one we could put against Biden or any other candidate. They're desperately out there trying to push them to vote. President Trump is going to win New Hampshire by a landslide. If you actually, because I talked to volunteers, right? Mm-hmm. And they have lists, and their lists are Republican prime voters mostly, Republican, demonstrably Republican leaning voters, right? And Nikki Haley doesn't come on the radar in a lot of the responses they get when they're talking on the phone. It's a lot of there are a lot of Democratic operatives trying to push Nikki Haley in New Hampshire, trying to make something happen. It's just not going to happen.
1 second. We have like 1 minute to commercials. I want to ask you that. Are there any chances Trump offer Nikki Haley a vice president position? Would it be smart?
No, absolutely not.
Not smart?
No.
She covered. She's a former governor. She's a woman. Why not?
I think Nikki Haley's positions are symptomatic of why we lost in 2022. She represents the past. Republicans must talk about social issues. Republicans have to offer more than tax cuts and platitudes about deregulation. That's why President Trump is able to connect with such a broad part of the electorate. The Republican Party needs to move into the future.
And Nikki Haley is not future. So.
Nikki Haley's ideas are part of the past. Nikki Haley right now is being funded by everyone who thought that President George W. Bush was too much of a populist.
He was a good president, though.
Actually, President Bush, I think both presidents, were very good presidents.
He was good.
But I think if you thought that W was a liberal, you like Nikki Haley.
In foreign policy, it was a liberal agenda, but we'll talk about foreign policy in the next segment. Stay with us, guys.
Sure.
Бутик Политик. Сказал, как обрезал.
Nicholas, welcome back.
Great to be back.
Thank you very much for being with us today. Now, let's switch to foreign policy a little bit. What do you think is the most important failure of recent administration in foreign policy? Like, the biggest, in your opinion?
I think to project the Biden administration has failed to grasp the severity of global threats. I think they've failed to treat them with the proper to afford them the proper recognition, and they have basically admitted to the world that they are weak.
They are weak.
Yes.
They are weak.
Feckless, and this has emboldened some of the worst actors globally. And when, look back at any administration, and Democrat or Republican, weakness breeds aggression.
Vacuum cannot be in world. If there's a vacuum, there's going to be some force that would like to fill the void, right? There cannot be void and hegemony, and everybody strive for it, and it's like it's a lot of actors right now. So let's say, but don't you think that United States policy are still in the mode of 1991 still, a little bit? Like we won Cold War, there's no more Soviet Union, we are the only power in the world, it's the end of history. It's like a Fukuyama mode, I'd call it. Fukuyama mode, like end of history. We are the only power and we can do whatever we want. We can strategize, we can plan whatever we want, but in reality we have more poles. It's multipolar world with the number of countries can destroy us also, unfortunately now. So how that administration, you're saying that administration doesn't relate absolutely to what's going on really in the world?
I think it's very useful that you brought up 1991 because this administration does seem stuck in a 1991 mindset where evil Russia is the one and only enemy, and they have to make Russia an enemy, it seems, right now. And it seems they have an obsession with Russia, and anything that is wrong in the world for this administration, they must blame Russia. And I just want to get back to obviously that's ridiculous. There's so many different actors, as you mentioned, and there's so many more threats in this world than Russia. And when we ran like scared children from Afghanistan, left behind so many allies, hundreds of $billions of the most modern weaponry around, let them kill.
Did you see Taliban special forces in American outfits, in American uniform, with American guns and with helmets, like technological 21st century crazy stuff with cameras? Crazy.
It was horrifying, and not just because I do want to mention, because it's escaped judgment and analysis, but how many people believed in democracy and believed in freedom and believed in education for women and girls in Afghanistan?
No, they're not there anymore. They left.
Or were murdered because we left.
Yeah, right.
In a very irresponsible way, I should add. And that basically sent the message to the world: do what you want. We really won't act, or we can't act. And I think just this maniacal focus on one country.
But why?
It's convenient for them.
But this is dangerous. And Kissinger and Misheimer, late Kissinger, was warning in 2014 when Ukraine things started, militarily, when Putin took Crimea. He warned Obama not to intervene, not to play in that backyard, not to play that game, because eventually it can bring Third World War and we won't survive it. He said it right. I remember those Foreign Affairs article that he wrote in 2014. And they're reading Foreign Affairs. They're not stupid. Whatever we can say about them, but Democrats are not stupid also. So why they're doing this? This is dangerous. It's a very dangerous game.
It is a dangerous game. I don't really think.
Why we need an enemy as Russia? Competitor, I understand. I understand competition, but to make like real enemy, like make Russian planes flying over our ships, and like in certain places they can just, it's a human factor. You can't come close to conflict with that country. It's impossible. This is crazy. It's suicidal, I would say. Why are we doing this?
It's because it's a short-sighted, narrow-minded, ignorant.
But they're not idiots. That's cognitive. That I don't understand. They're not idiots.
Well,
they're very structural in certain approaches. In Africa, for example, they do structural approach. We're going to put base here, base here. They're thinking through. Why are they doing this?
Maybe they, again, maybe they think that we're the idiots. We're not you. Or maybe they think that people who have my views are idiots. It could be. But, Kirill, let me just...
This is strange.
You made an excellent point about being a competitor. Russia will always be a competitor of the United States.
Yeah, sure.
Always. No question. It's natural.
Right.
It would be scary if, Russia was not in a position to compete with the United States.
We have so many things to do together, by the way, right?
Interesting. I mentioned Afghanistan. In 2001...
Russia gave us help.
Immediately. And, back then, people criticized, before 9/11, people criticized President Bush about approaching Russia and trying to improve relations and work together. And he made comments about, he met Putin and had a good meeting, etc.
Right. I remember Putin visiting Texas on a range. Right.
Yeah. Boy, that cooperation served us well back in 2001.
Yeah.
So, look, I just want to be clear. For me, the invasion of Ukraine was despicable. However, there are reasons why that happened.
It's Obama administration.
Obama.
Right.
And
Biden too.
This may sound simplistic, right? But does anybody really believe that if President Trump was in the Oval Office these last few years, that the invasion would have taken place in the first place? Absolutely not.
No, they would talk, sure.
Absolutely not.
Sure, they would talk points. There are points. They were peace offered on certain terms. Those terms are negotiable. There are certain things not negotiable, but certain things are negotiable. They were supposed to talk, not to send emissaries from satellite of America states like France and Germany to Moscow, which is absolutely useless, and talk. They should talk directly on certain demands and certain talking things, important things. Administration decided not to do it.
And I'll go the demonic events of October 7th would not have happened probably. Hold on. So it may have occurred on a smaller level, which would still be demonic and despicable and gruesome, but Iran bears the blame for what happened on October 7th.
In part.
Those were Iranian military operatives and advisors.
Obviously, Hamas is an Iranian client, military wing. Zadim al-Qassam is Iranian trained, supplied, and financed. Understood. But even circus around Nasrallah and Hezbollah, they were saying that we didn't expect that intensity, whatever they did. Because civilization is one thing, Persians are, Iranians are civilizations. What those people in Hamas, they're not even people, not humans. Whatever they did, it's not civilizational approach. It's evil. It's absolute evil. It's not how civilized countries wage warfare. It's something beyond. Iranians in part, but it was not probably that scale that they were agreed upon. For operation they were agreeing, but not the scale what happened.
I think it's time that
they should answer for this, right?
We hold them accountable for their proxies.
Right.
Just because they may not have the propensity for such gruesome acts does not mean that they're stupid enough to know, not to know what their activities can cause. And I refuse to accept that Iranians could not foresee something like this.
They could. Now, unfortunately, we're running out of time. We're going to continue that conversation in the near future. Thank you very much, Nicholas Chamberas, Political Affairs Strategist. Thank you very much for coming today. And next time, we're going to talk foreign policies.
Kirill, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Бутик Политик. Сказал, как обрезал.